Welcome to the latest episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host Kevin. This week we'll be discussing the 1992 horror classic Candyman, starring Virginia Madsen, Tony Todd, and Xander Berkeley. It's an all-star cast. You know them, don't you? Each week on the B Movie Club I'll discuss certain guilty pleasures and forgotten classics of the modern cinema, if you will. You can go ahead and go to our page on Facebook, Original B Movie Club. Give us the big thumbs up. You can also go to our page on YouTube, Kevin D, that's me, and hit subscribe. It's totally free. And you can also follow me on Twitter at the B Movie Club. If you follow these three things, you subscribe, you do these things, you'll get all the latest updates. You'll know whenever I've posted a new video. And I often just post wacky things I find online that have to do with movies, B-movies, crazy actors and quotes, things like that. So don't forget to do those things and spread the word, won't you? Candyman. The story takes place in Chicago. Some researchers from the local university are writing a thesis, a doctoral thesis, on kind of this one particular urban legend that's basically been found the south side of Chicago. This urban legend consists of a mythical character named Candyman. Legend has it that if you go in front of a mirror and say Candyman's name 5 times, he will appear behind you and he has a hook and he'll get you. Okay? So, but the people who follow this folklore are really into it. Like evidently this one particular project, Cabrini Green in Chicago, there's graffiti talking about Candyman. There is like really elaborate graffiti where it's not just somebody writing the word Candyman, it's also like kind of disturbing pictures of the Candyman. And you also see this phrase, sweets to the sweet, which kind of makes people think about Candyman as well. So they're out interviewing people, and the thing about it is they also feel that there's a tie-in with actual criminal activity going on, because obviously this is a very rough neighborhood. And one thing that they discover is that due to an architectural problem, the medicine chests in the bathroom, if you literally pull them out, you'll see the back of the medicine chest of the next apartment. Okay? And if you push that through, suddenly you have full access to whatever apartment is next to you. So they feel like this is where people think it's the Candyman coming out and getting you. It's actually just a run-of-the-mill bad guy, like a real live person who's just coming through your medicine cabinets and getting you. But again, people, like all urban legends and folklore, people are like, oh yeah, you know, I know something about that. That happened to my neighbor's cousin's ex-wife's stepchild's cousin, that sort of thing. Everybody seems to remember, oh yeah, I read an article about that. Oh yeah, somebody told me about that, 10 years ago. So again, it's a folklore. So they go in and actually go to one of these places where an actual murder occurred. And they go into basically the apartment that belonged to the murdered woman, open up the medicine cabinet and find like a doorway leading into the next apartment, which is like this creepy place. Again, you see a lot of that freaky graffiti all over the wall, disturbing imagery, if you will. So they feel like there's something going on here. But here's the thing. By the fact that they're kind of these college researchers who are just kind of dealing with it as like it's just a thesis, doesn't mean anything. Evidently, it's starting to influence opinions of people who live in that area. Which means, one night, while they're in that apartment, they say Candyman 5 times, which wakens up the actual real Candyman. Candyman, legend has it, was the son of a former slave in the late 1800s. And he was a fine artist, and he was commissioned to do a portrait of this plantation owner's beautiful daughter. And of course, as often happens, you bring in the artist, and you have the beautiful daughter, one thing leads to another, and she gets pregnant. Now, the man who would become Candyman was set upon by this plantation owner and his gang, gang of thugs, and they do some bizarre things to him. First, chop off his hand, put a hook there, like Captain Hook, and then they put honey all over him, and the bees, they have bees, evidently. It's a bee plantation. They have bees attack poor Candyman, and that's the end of him. Or is it? So now, he's kind of this phantom who terrorizes one particular neighborhood in Chicago. Why Chicago? I don't know. But it's real. It's like a real thing. Now, as Candyman begins to terrorize the main researcher, she starts blacking out. So she, he does something and says something to her. She wakes up later in a pool of blood. And she's in this woman's apartment, one of the residents of Cabrini Green, and her baby's missing. So now she's convinced that this woman stole her baby, and so they're fighting. What are we going to do? And the cops show up and they arrest her. Because why is she there covered in blood? Where's the woman's baby? That sort of thing. And this happens again and again. At one point, she is kind of passing out at home. Candyman says some stuff to her. Her friend shows up at the door. That's the end of her friend. Now again, the police and even her husband are a little, let's just say they're incredulous. They don't believe it. They're skeptical that the Candyman's doing this stuff. Especially because every time she wakes up, she's got like a knife in her hand. Oh, it seems suspicious even for me. So we're starting to think maybe there really isn't a Candyman. Maybe she's kind of losing her mind. As the movie progresses, we begin to kind of at least think that maybe Helen, who's the researcher, she's like maybe the reincarnated beautiful daughter from 200 years ago. Who knows? Who knows what the story is? I don't want to spoil everything. I don't want to give everything away. There's a lot of plot twists and turns, a lot of surprises. What can I tell you about this movie? It is based upon a short story by Clive Barker, the famed master of horror, called The Forbidden. And it's very loosely based. The original short story took place in England, for example. This was obviously in Chicago. And there wasn't all this kind of strange imagery of, the former, the son of a slave with the hook hand and the bees. That was kind of, and the whole Bloody Mary kind of aspect to it was all created for this movie specifically. It had nothing to do with the original short story. Interestingly enough, Candyman was played by Tony Todd, who's got the really deep voice. I'm Candyman. I'm coming to get you. That's him. Like that impression. He's been in a ton of stuff. I was watching The Rock recently, the Nicolas Cage classic. Tony Todd's in that. You can find him in the Final Destination movies. He's in a ton of stuff. He was in the remake of Night of the Living Dead. So he's the Candyman. Originally, they were talking about having Eddie Murphy play this role. I mean, I don't know how that would have worked. It's all very strange. For Virginia Madsen plays Helen, the researcher who's researching. I guess that makes sense. They said that if she didn't take the role, their second choice was a little-known actress at the time named Sandra Bullock. Probably would have won an Oscar for this one. Virginia Madsen is the sister of Michael Madsen, who you remember from Reservoir Dogs, Kill Bill, a lot of Tarantino kind of things. Species, there you go. More recently, Virginia Madsen, you've seen her in Sideways. She was kind of the love interest of Paul Giamatti. So there you go. It all works out. Interestingly enough, I watched this movie. It's a little convoluted, to say the least. The legend is kind of strange. Again, why would, the plantation owner and his gang, why wouldn't they just do something kind of more, I don't know, typical to the Candyman, instead of like, well, we're going to saw your hand off and put a hook there. Why? Why not? And then we're going to get some bees and put some honey on you. Just seems a little bizarre and elaborate. Like, there doesn't seem to be any reason why he's got bees and honey on him. I guess because he's the Candyman. There's really no reason as to why he's called the Candyman. I was laughing about this. He's basically dressed like Superfly with a Captain Hook hook. Okay? He's got a big old fur trench coat with big old cuffs and a crazy old hook coming out there. So it's kind of got that, what is it, I Know What You Did Last Summer kind of feel to it, where there's the killer with the hook. So they kind of grabbed a bunch of folklore and kind of squished it together to create a Candyman character. What's interesting is the score for this movie was written by famed composer Philip Glass, which it's very striking if you listen to it. It definitely sets the tone. Philip Glass is a famed minimalist composer, which he doesn't like that term. But what's funny is they went to him, because he's kind of a highbrow kind of composer type. And he thought he was going to be contributing to kind of a low-budget independent film with a lot of heart and pathos, blah, blah, blah. And he was bummed to discover that it was just kind of a run-of-the-mill slasher flick that had his beautiful composition. And literally he withheld the rights to his music for like 10 years after this movie came out, so they could never release Candyman the soundtrack, I guess, because we all wanted that. We're all rushing to put that on our iPods, I guess. So, little interesting fact there. There's a crucial scene later in the movie where Candyman throws open his jacket and you see like kind of his skeletal chest with bees all over it. And bees are like coming out. And he actually opens his mouth and there are bees coming out of his mouth. Some interesting thing about this is that they bred the bees specifically for this movie to basically mature at a very early age. So after only 12 days, they looked like fully mature bees, but they did not have the full stinging capabilities of normal bees. They were made specifically for this purpose. And Tony Todd, who played Candyman, actually had to wear like kind of a plastic thing in his mouth so that the bees wouldn't like literally crawl down his throat. Isn't that lovely? Another thing, Virginia Madsen, who's also in the scene with the bees crawling on her, is like violently allergic to bee stings. Not a good move to hire someone violently allergic to bee stings for a scene where there's bees crawling all over. Just my opinion. They actually had to have like an ambulance standing by with like, I don't know, EpiPens and shots of adrenaline just in case something goes wrong. So, good times, good times. What else can I tell you about this movie? This movie was actually filmed on location at Cabrini Green in Chicago. And it's really not a great neighborhood at that time. So they had to make a deal with the local gang members that they could be extras in the movie if they didn't cause any problems. And in spite of this, a sniper still took a shot at one of the crew's vans. Luckily, nobody was hurt. So that's important. This movie actually spawned 2 sequels that just kind of go off on their own. I haven't seen the sequels. What can I tell you? They didn't do quite so well as the original. And in fact, Candyman had like all sorts of accolades after this movie. It's often listed among like the best slasher flicks, the best crazy surprise endings, the best pimp guys with a hook, I guess, movies. So it did well. Didn't necessarily rocket any of the actors to stardom, but what are you gonna do? It currently has a 77% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, so you know that's good. B-Movie Club member Murray talks about one of his favorite scenes is where there's like a meat cleaver, Helen and the lady with the missing child, they're kind of fighting and the cleaver gets hit. Yeah, that was one of his scenes. Evidently, there's a lot of blood in this movie. And he commented that the blood was as real as he'd seen it in these movies. So I guess that's something. Next week, I'm going to go ahead and move away from the Candyman. Okay. No relation to Mr. Bojangles. The Candyman. The Candyman can. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, next week we're going to be doing a comedy. Clerks. starring Kevin Smith and some other of his friends, I guess. Currently streaming on Netflix, so rush out and see it. Let me know what you think. Send any favorite scenes, favorite quotes, questions, or comments, and I just might talk about them on the show. Don't forget to go to our page on Facebook, Original B Movie Club. Give us the thumbs up. Go to our page on YouTube and subscribe. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at the B Movie Club. Don't forget to spread the word. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote. And here it is. You are not content with the stories, so I was obliged to come. I'm going to work on my Candyman impression. Thank you. I'm not Rich Little or Rich Hall or any of the riches, really. Thank you for joining us. Next week, Clerks. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Be well.